So at this point, we'll bring in Mark Anderson. Mark, tragedy in Ukraine, much of it through the efforts of the US with weapons and money. But of course, can we say who's in charge of America? It's becoming ever more difficult at the moment. Welcome.
Great to be here, guys, like usual. Yeah, this first slide, this is kind of an interesting item, given the Kennedy family's history and what I've referred to on the show as the ironic Kennedy retirement plan for any of them that got into high office from that well-known American family. Here we have from Politico, RFK Jr. fumes at Biden administration over Secret Service protection. And this one is, to be sure and to be fair, a little open for debate. It's possible that RFK Jr. is seeking Secret Service protection a little too soon. But what he's basically saying is the Secret Service and the overall federal government that's responsible for this stuff is denying him Secret Service protection. Now, moving on from there, this is a little bit from Politico from July 28th. RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign slammed the Biden administration Friday, that's this past Friday, alleging politics was behind the Democratic presidential candidate being denied Secret Service protection. And he noted, since the assassination of my father in '68, candidates for president are provided Secret Service protection, but not me, RFK Jr. wrote in a tweet. Now, CNN did publish an article, and I'm looking at another screen over here, where there's a quote from Jonathan Wackrow, a CNN law enforcement analyst and former Secret Service agent. They did say, we are too far out from the election and Kennedy just doesn't meet the criteria. And that's what this Mr. Wackrow said. He's not a major presidential candidate. Get that. You can make as many requests as you want. Unless you meet that criteria that's been set forth, it's just not warranted. And it says here, pardon me, that Kennedy is entitled to argue that he should be given special treatment because of his family's history. His father, the senator and Democratic presidential candidate RFK, was assassinated in '68, and his uncle JFK in '63. When another uncle, Ted Kennedy, was considering a 1980 presidential run, President Jimmy Carter at the time preemptively granted Ted Kennedy Secret Service protection. And there's a note in here that Obama was an exception to all of this and received very early Secret Service protection, as Time magazine and other establishment organs very aggressively promoted Obama very early in his presidential aspirations. But at any rate, the main thing here is that they're saying Kennedy is not a major presidential candidate. But the other side of the story, of course, is that with a name like that and a history like that, this is really a very debatable item. And Dennis Kucinich, who I met at the Texas Independent Convention back in early April that I covered for UKC, this is what Kucinich had to say. Kucinich ended up being Kennedy's campaign manager. In response to CNN's request for comment or CNN's fact check, Kennedy campaign manager Dennis Kucinich called CNN's assessment pretty ignorant and argued that we have been unable to understand the trauma inflicted on the nation by the assassinations of the 1960s. And Kucinich also noted that Obama did have Secret Service protection at this same point in his campaign that RFK is in now. So it's just kind of an interesting item here that someone from that family with that history is not being treated like a major presidential candidate. And I think that although it may be too early, I think that RFK himself and Kucinich are correct in saying that politics is at play here. They don't want to acknowledge that RFK is a major candidate because hands down, Biden would lose to RFK Jr. There's no doubt about it. So this one bears watching, and we'll see what happens in the days and weeks ahead.
Yeah, and the optics on this mark for Biden are just horrendous, because he's essentially disrespecting the Democratic Party and indeed the nation of America's own history in doing this. And it just makes him look, well, cheap, really. and also like he's running scared of this candidate. I mean, politically, this looks just inept.
Yeah, Biden himself, on his own steam, could never beat Kennedy. I don't think so. I think the Kennedy name and his intelligence and his passion for what he does, I think would win a lot of voters. And the Kennedy family has traditionally been, of course, a kind of a mainstay of the Democratic Party. The way the Democratic Party is shunning the Kennedy family in general is ironic and a little difficult to understand.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much for that. We will continue to watch.